Well, hey, hearing that music made me think of the last time I was in this auditorium. It was my senior prom. So look at me now. I'm going to start with a story that I haven't told in a long time, and it has to do with the Hanson investigation, the worst spy in American history who I helped investigate and take down some years ago. It was the first day of this investigation into our worst spy, certainly in the FBI and quite possibly in US history. And he brings me into his office, and he sits me down across the desk from him. He looks at me and he says, "Have you ever heard of Hansons Law?" Now, to set the stage, we created an office for him, an entire division, because we knew that this was quite possibly the spy that we had been hunting for over 2 decades. A man who had completely undermined and destroyed our intelligence capability and our ability to effectively pursue counterintelligence here in the US. When we can't do counterintelligence, that means that the spies get away with everything. He'd also given nuclear secrets to the Soviets. He had caused the death of our assets overseas, had ruined all sorts of undercover operations and protocols, and he'd given up a tunnel that we bored under the Russian embassy here in Washington, D.C. Believe it or not, that's true. So bad guy. And we're in a SCIF, a sensitive, compartmentalized intelligence facility, right? The kind of place where secrets and people go in and only the people go out. The difference in this case was he and I were going in and only one of us was coming out. So I'm looking at this person that we suspect of espionage, the worst spy ever. And he says, Hansons Law. So I shrugged my shoulder, said, well, I don't remember learning about that at the FBI Academy at Quantico. What's that? He said, Hansons Law is this. The spy is always in the worst possible place. I said, really? You're telling me that? Now, my stomach was doing a roller coaster, and I kept my jaw from dropping, but I kept the poker face on. I looked at this guy that I'm supposed to be investigating for espionage, who's just said the spy is in the worst possible place. And I said, what do you mean? He said, the spy is in the place where they have access to that information and the know-how to sell it to the highest bidder and do the most damage. And he was exactly right. He wasn't just the worst spy in US history, he was our first cyber spy. He was able to exploit computer systems in the FBI that were just at the beginning stage of implementing cybersecurity. In fact, what we were supposed to be doing overtly, not covertly, within the information assurance section we built for him in that SCIF was to develop cybersecurity for the FBI. And of course, what the FBI wanted him to do is steal secrets and spy. And he did it for years, exploiting computer systems. And the modern spy has just taken up the torch that he has passed. So I want to start with a big theme that I want you to take with you. It's something I've been saying for quite some time. There are no hackers. Let that sink in. There are no hackers. There are only spies. Hacking is nothing more than the necessary evolution of espionage. Think about that for a second. The Hollywood has given us this version of the hacker that's completely wrong. And most people, not anyone here, but most people buy into this. Here it is, right? Kid in a hoodie. Sorry, ladies, it's almost always a guy, although I know some amazing female hackers out there. Hacking away at a keyboard, bop, 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 bop. You never really see the screen because Hollywood doesn't think we're all smart enough to figure out what's going on. Nobody reads code. Pounds an energy drink, grabs some carbs, hits one key and says what? I'm in. Into what? I mean, Harry Potter might as well just walk across the screen, wave his wand, and say, I'm in too. Because that's magic. It doesn't happen. That's not how it happens. What really happens is very sophisticated, well-funded, and well-computerized foreign intelligence services are coming after us. Not just our businesses, but industry and the government. And they've been successful for years. So we call them breaches, not hacks, and we call them cyber attackers, cyber spies, cyber criminals, not hackers. You know where all the hackers are now? They're working all the booths outside. Because think about it, you make more money, you have way less chance of getting arrested, and you get to do all the same fun stuff. So in that vacuum, the spies have moved in. And the major reason is because of how we communicate. We don't store paper in file cabinets anymore. Spies don't need to go spend a lot of time recruiting someone to sneak into the building and steal a paper document and shove it down their pants and go through this long rigmarole of drops and signal sites to get it to the foreign intelligence officer. Now the spy can just sit in his office in Moscow and try to get somebody in his target organization to open an email. And that is why the majority of major breaches in the past number of years have been caused by an email. And I know you're hearing a lot about that today. Email security is a big deal. But think about how impersonal we've gotten in our communications and why that impersonal nature of communications lends itself to attack. Just think about what happens when you get a phone call, right? Of course, the best communication is face-to-face. You can immediately verify that I'm talking to the person I plan to talk to. But when you get a phone call and you're in your office and it's unknown number, I guarantee you the first thing you do is glare at your phone. How dare somebody call me, right? I mean, why couldn't they have just sent me an email? So what do? Well, you ignore it. You let it go to voicemail. Then you listen to the voicemail. You think about what you want to say, and then you call the person back. So what have you just done to your phone call? You've turned it into an email. Same thing. Look, I have special forces friends, right? Because of what I used to do, working undercover for the FBI, I know a lot of these guys, and they take it to an extreme. I might get an email or a call and just says, meet for coffee. That's it, period. All right? Is this important? I don't know. So I call them back, I say, where do you want to meet? We set it up. I get there, and of course, because these are former special forces people and I'm former undercover guy and we're all sort of spy people, you can't be the first person to be seen in a coffee shop. So now you got two grown men who are sneaking around a coffee shop trying to spot the other guy before the other one. Of course, I win because, I'm me. And we get that crushing handshake, and I say, what's wrong? He says, oh, just wanted to meet for coffee. Email security, right? He never puts anything in an email. These guys, that's taking it way to an extreme. But a little bit of this can really help because not being precise and secure in our communications is allowing spies to insert themselves in those communications and fool us. An attacker doesn't want to attack a computer. That's why I said that version of the hacker that Hollywood is giving us is wrong. Why waste that time if you can just fool a person? And that's why spies are using traditional espionage methods to trick or social engineer people into giving them access to computer systems. So it is a person attacking a person through their machine, rather than the old spy versus spy where, a spy might sit in a bar waiting for the government employee to come out with their government ID badge that verifies that they're working in their target enterprise, and then they wait until they find the guy who's drinking way too much, and they become buddies with them, and then, hey, I can help you with your problems that I've learned out about. Now it's more, if I can get into your system, because I can trick you into clicking on a link or opening an attachment or many of the other ways that email as a vector of attack can work, then I can turn you into what I call a virtual trust insider. You've just become a spy in your organization and you don't even know it. So what can you do? Well, think about this. Hanson and I are sitting in the skiff, right? And the entire investigation was about getting him to say things that he didn't want to say, that communication, into finally tripping up, into giving us the idea of where the information we needed to catch him was going to be. Now, I managed to do that. That's a whole nother story, and I'm happy to tell it to you later. But I've been thinking a lot about that skiff. What if we turn our security, what if we turn our data, protecting our data, the same way? If you think about a skiff in the government, right? These sensitive, compartmentalized intelligence facilities, that means that we've gone above top secret or right to the side of top secret, however you want to think about it, until all information is in compartments, and if you don't need to know it, you shouldn't know it. Well, we surround that information with cameras and baffles on the vents and heat sensors and motion sensors. We audit everything that happens on the computer systems. We pay attention to what is going on within that skiff. And like I said, people go in, but the information doesn't come out, unless, of course, you're Robert Hanson, and we're trying to get you to drop it to the Russians so we can catch you in the act of espionage. So turn your data into a skiff. How do you do that? Well, because attackers are attacking people, right? If a spy is trying to compromise a person, we need to move security as close to that person as we possibly can. So we look at the endpoint. And the endpoint, of course, are your phones, your laptops, servers, everything that's close to a person. Like, for example, your cell phone, which is like most of our second brain. The last thing we want is for someone to compromise our smartphones, because then they can get into everything. Ask every Hollywood actor who has ever had their information compromised, and I know some of them, and it is really terrible. But that's why attackers want to go after that. Move security as close to the person who will make a mistake as possible. That way you can be rapid in pivoting and stopping the attack as soon as it hits that moment close to a person. Which brings up my next theme. We must hunt these threats. We must hunt these threats before they hunt us. Consider the fact that security traditionally is always in a reactive mode. Even when we think about defense, we think, okay, they're going to attack and we're going to notice the attack super fast and then we are going to react to it and stop it. Have to do that, but it's also incredibly important to hunt the threat. Find it. Think like a spy hunter. Think like someone who understands counterintelligence. That means that we're being active in our profile, not always reacting to the threat, but seeking it out and trying to take it down. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the threat is going to exist, it's going to hit the endpoint, a person is going to be fooled, and then you're going to be compromised. So the important thing there is having that visibility into what's happening in your environment. And not to get too overly technical, but if you don't understand what's happening in your environment, then you will lose. Think of your environment as your home, right? The burglar or the person who wants to rob you has the time to case it, to see if you've got the big mean dog, to see if you've got a great alarm system, to do all these things to try to notice the best time to attack you. But in the cyber world, the second they set foot in your environment, you should be God there. You know exactly where the dog lives to let it out. You know exactly where you keep any weapons. You know all the corners. You know how to get through that place without the lights on. Think of security as protecting the most important thing to you, and then you will win. So, Robert Hanson gives me this great Hansons Law, and I've never forgotten it. I've never forgotten it a day in my life. In fact, I've thought of that idea that the spy is in the worst possible place throughout my entire career, and I've always sought to hunt the spy. But I really think that we need to update that law. So today, for the first time, because I've been thinking a lot about this, I want to give you a new law. Let's call it O'Neill's Law, because if Hanson can do it, I can do it too. And here it is. There are no hackers. There are no hackers. There are only spies. Hacking is nothing more than the necessary evolution of espionage. We must hunt the threat before the threat hunts us, because the spy is always in the worst possible place. Thank you very much.